This is Timothy Gordon announcing a new section of Aristotle's Ethics Live beginning January the 19th, taught by me in person on Zoom. It's going to be Tuesday nights at 7 for the whole family. All ages are welcome. Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics is life-changing. Learn it with me on Tuesday nights. For more information, go to the Enroll tab on timothyjgordon.com. Welcome, Parish Orphans and Retrogrades. Today, I have with me a special guest, Miss Christine Niles from Church Militant. How are you, Christine?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. I noticed 4 or 5 days ago that Twitter and YouTube was heating back up, and it's heating back up on the conservative Catholic right between the parties that are always seem to be squabbling, and it's not. I feel like you guys get caught up in a lot of these things. The way I feel I do, where it's not your fault. You're trying to be objective, trying to be fair, and you got ankle biters, fellow people on the right that are upset. This time over old news, really, from April, May of earlier this year, from specifically your reportage on the spotlight on the Society of St. Pius X. What happened? I saw you and John Henry Westen of Lifesite were going back and forth in separate videos.
Right.
Just wanted to give you a chance to say what happened.
Right. So there is a lot of background here. As I clarified in my video response to John Henry a few days ago, he is my friend. I consider him a friend. I've met him before, and we've gone to Mass before, we've prayed before, which is why, as I noted in my video response, I actually reached out to him privately as a friend through text messages expressing my concerns about the way that Lifesite News was going about its own investigation of the SSPX. And, John Henry admitted that the reason that they got involved in investigating the SSPX is because Michael Voris, who's also friends with John Henry, encouraged him to do so. After we aired our groundbreaking spotlight on April 22nd, exposing this, vast scandal of sex abuse and cover-up in the SSPX that really no one's ever done before. Right. That's when Michael reached out to various friends and said, hey, why didn't Lifesite News do its own investigation into this? And so that's why John Henry decided to do it. Here's the problem. The person that he chose to do the investigation is a man named Stephen Cox. He's in his 20s. He's very young, very little experience. As far as I know, no real experience as an investigator. I know he's written things as a reporter, as an actual investigator, which takes many other different kinds of skills. I don't know how much experience he has in that. But far more concerning is the fact that Cox attends SSPX masses regularly. He's given money to the SSPX, and then he works for an outfit, Catholic Family News, that receives money from the SSPX through ad revenue. That alone is enough to say this cannot be someone. That's conflict of interest, classic conflict of interest.
Right.
This is like you asking to investigate your friend. It's like any honest journalist should say, I can't do it. I've got to, recuse myself. I've got to remove myself. You need to pick somebody else because I'm too close to the situation. And then there's money involved as well, giving as well as taking. I mean, that right there, I'm sorry. And then even worse, and this is a violation of basic journalistic ethics, he did not disclose any of those ties in his investigative report. Nowhere, not even in a little footnote at the bottom. That's a total violation of journalistic ethics. You can't do that. It's dishonest. Now, maybe he just, because he's so young and inexperienced, maybe he just didn't know that he should. But that right there is enough to discredit Lifesite's so-called investigation. I warned John Henry about this privately in several texts, and I wanted to get on the phone with him and talk with him about it, and he ignored me, unfortunately, and he just went ahead with the story. And of course, it required a response from us. So I immediately responded to Stephen Cox's investigation with a very detailed point-by-point response showing where it's inaccurate, what you missed, etc. I encourage people to, this is separate from my video response from John Henry. This is actually a written article that I wrote in response to Cox. So
I'll link it.
Thank you. But it's unfortunate because what I had warned John Henry in my text was, look, if you issue an investigative report that makes it look like you're exonerating the SSPX, this is going to look very bad for Lifesite. It's going to look like you're taking the side of sex abusers. And I don't want Lifesite, going through that, getting that sort of backlash. But that is exactly what happened. Now, the victims, because I speak with victims, they are so angry with life. They're so disgusted. Some of them have vowed, after years of supporting Lifesite, they will never support them again because they're so upset that Lifesite looks like it's taking the part of the SSPX. And that's exactly what I warned John Henry would happen.
Yeah, objectivity being the watchword.
Yeah.
And be it known, there's been a long period of years where my main Catholic news needs were filled by Church Militant and Lifesite. And I've spoken to John Henry on the phone as well. Like, so this is us being objective, objectivity being the watchword. And also, it's kind of ironic that you, back in late April, early May, were getting accused of being in breach of objectivity when all these people back in late 2018, early 2019, including me, I was on Taylor Marshall's channel. We were all going to Church Militant, and so was Lifesite. Didn't they used to have a Church Militant link for news or something like that? If I remember correctly, maybe I have that wrong.
Maybe.
We were all borrowing your McCarrick reportage, which was excellent because it was on the other side, the church far left. And we were all, without any kinds of hand-wringing or anything like that, everyone was going to Church Militant's reportage. You, in my view, and I don't see a reasonable way to counter this, you demonstrated your objectivity by being willing to report fairly on the Catholic far right, which hits a lot closer to home. I mean, you and even me are much more sympathetic to anyone on the Catholic far right, like the SSPX, than we are to McCarrick or World.
Yes.
Give me a break. So that's objectivity in its essence. So I find it extremely intellectually offensive when people were out there calling you names. Some of the names they called you in particular were just, offensive simpliciter. But I find it intellectually offensive when people who are demonstrating the soul of a lack of objectivity are accusing you of that.
Yeah, and this is something I specifically addressed as well in my video response about this so-called bias. This is a canard that's been raised by SSPX loyalists to try to discredit my reporting so that people can just write it off and not even look at it. It is utterly false. I've said it for months and months now. It is utterly false. And the reason it's false is this. Like I said, I take the same hard-nosed investigative stance towards the SSPX that I have towards my many, many, many investigations in other parts of the church. And my track record demonstrates that. I've been at Church Militant now for almost 7 years. I've done all sorts of investigative reports in Fresno, Monsignor Craig Harrison, right? Back from where you are, Bakersfield. I've done loads of reports. Saginaw Diocese, Father Robert Freeland, who's now in jail. I've done loads of, Cardinal Supich, the Vatican. New York, loads and loads of investigators, very hard hitting against Cardinal Dolan, all the McQuelly and all of that stuff. And so I take the same attitude towards the SSPX. Of course, all the trads were cheering us on when we did all those other reports, like you were saying. But then I take the same attitude towards the SSPX, and suddenly it's, oh, you're so biased. You hate them. What's wrong with you? All this stuff. And it's like, that is the bias, not me. That attitude is that you're saying, okay, be really tough on these guys over here in the so-called Vatican II church, but give the SSPX a pass.
Right. And bias, I think their definition of bias is that you don't skew your reportage to fit the SSPX narrative, which is the opposite of what I certainly mean. Yeah, or that, you're not sufficiently giving the SSPX the benefit of the doubt. Well, hang on just a moment. Are you saying then that I should have given Cardinal Dolan the benefit of the doubt, or Cardinal McCarrick, or Pope Francis, when we found out that he was covering up sex abuse, we should be giving? No, you don't take that attitude towards them. You immediately assume, they've covered up and we need to go after them hard. With the SSPX, right. No, you've got to give them the benefit. Charity, mercy, double standard. Yeah. And again, see, you and I are in kind of analogous situations insofar as you're associated with CM and with Mike Voris, a mutual friend of ours. I'm associated with my brother through name and through blood, and both of these guys have in the past, in the present, maybe in the case of my brother, gotten engaged really actively in SSPX's canonical hermeneutics, and that's fine. And you and I are just associated with these outfits, but I've never weighed in on this issue. You've never weighed in on this issue I'm a trained philosopher. Like, that doesn't really interest me. Some related issues interest me, and this is one of those related issues. I want molesters gone after and shown to be criminals. So it is bothersome when people insinuate that me or that you are involved in this in any way associated with bias. By the way, did you ever get any thank you notes or flowers from honest SSPX after those two priests were arrested? Was it in France and Switzerland? Was it Father Al?
Oh, yeah.
Well, yeah, well, did you get piles of... Yeah, I mean, or after, how about this? After Kansas City Star corroborated your reporting. How about after CNA, who has no dog in the fight, corroborated your reporting, or the Kansas state government did? I mean, are those guys all on Church Militant's payroll? Are they all premium members or what? Did you get a pile of flowers and apology letters?
The only flowers I got were from a group of SSPX abuse victims who were very kind and very sweet, and they thanked me. And they said that I was their hero. And they just thanked me because I've been out there going to bat for them, and they feel like I'm the only one who's out there going to bat for them. So those are the only flowers I've ever received. So, yeah.
You get the point, though. I mean, it's like people were calling you the worst names. My wife and I we were getting up in arms over here actually it wasn't here in Mississippi. It was in California before we moved in late April. I mean, a lot of good people were. It was kind of an eye-opening moment, and it sort of betrays the soul of maybe not a whole side in the argument, but a large contingent of the whole side in the argument. And the point is, you were absolute. If it wasn't just a canard, any honest SSPX should have said, "Oh, wow, complete corroboration with arrests." I mean, also there was a Swedish documentary on this. I think in 17 or 18, a French documentary on this in 17 or 18. Somehow you must have had access to a time machine and influenced these people. I wonder if any SSPX are interested in they're honest. And again, I'm much more sympathetic to their side than to McCarrick.
Right.
So this is what is it? Correct me if I'm wrong, because this is a question, and I don't want to be wrong and get myself into libel issues. But Archbishop Lefebvre risked his eternal salvation to consecrate 4 bishops. This is what happened in 1988 that led to all of the squabbling over their status as per ecclesiology. Is it by my count 3 out of the 4 of those ones what have in some way or another been linked to the cover-up of abuse, or am I exaggerating that, or is it only 2?
Let's see.
Fillet. By my count, I have a Fillet who was
Fillet, definitely.
Williamson,
yes, definitely. And he still is involved in helping sexual predators, welcoming them into his resistance. De Galarreta was involved in pushing through Aruta Goiti, who there were multiple allegations of homosexual predation in the seminary that Aruta Goiti was very aware of, but he okayed his ordination anyway. So did Archbishop Lefebvre, by the way. Yes, he did. And then as far as the other one, I'm not quite sure. But yeah, there are at least 3.
Tissier. Yeah, I don't think Tissier. I've never seen any reportage on it. But I mean, can we just let that ratio ring out for a second? I've never spoken publicly once about, schismatic, they're complex. They're definitely not ordinary canonical status. Like, who cares? That's not really my thing. But it is a fact that 3 of the 4, 75%, compare that to even the church left. The bishops that really are the head of this small contingent of the church, or whatever you call it, or are caught up in this stuff. I mean, let's see.
And also, 100% of every superior general of the SSPX has been involved in some kind of cover-up. Fillet by far the most, simply because he's been a superior general for the longest amount of time, almost like 2 decades. So, he's been a special focus of ours. But yeah, as far as the whole canonical status, the SSPX's canonical status has absolutely zero relevance to whether or not they're committing sex abuse and covering it up. No relevance. So that's another canard that people bring up to try to distract from the issue. They start wanting to argue about it. Well, you said this about them is schismatic, all this other stuff. And it's like, let's not focus on that, because that has nothing to do whether or not they're sex abusers in their ranks. So let's focus on what matters here, the sex abuse and the cover-up. That's what I'm focused on, not this other stuff. That's never really been a focus of mine. That's fine if other people want to argue about that. That's totally fine. This is not the focus of my reports. Let's focus on the sex abuse and the cover-up. How do we eradicate that? And to your point as well, there have been some honest SSPXers who have, come out and supported me and said, thank you for doing this. I'm devastated. I've been part of the SSPX for a very long time. And to learn about this is heartbreaking, but thank you for what you do. And that's why, I said, look, if you really care about the society, if you really love them, one, you would be thanking me for doing this. Right. And two, you would be encouraging the SSPX, hey, come on, reform yourselves here, clean up your act. That's what you would be doing if you really care about the SSPX, not just attacking the whistleblower, attacking the messenger.
It's shocking. It's really disappointing to someone that considered them a lot closer to where I'm at than, the other side of the church. And they were using the exact same tactics we saw in late 2018, only they didn't have the same set of cheerleaders, right? By my count also, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, because you know more about this than me, I don't think Lifesite, which used to be one of my absolute regulars, I don't think they said that I saw a word until October. Am I wrong there?
No, they did not, because I'm friends with them. I waited and waited and waited to hear what Lifesite was going to say, and the silence was deafening. I even reached out to John Henry several times over the summer saying, hey, John Henry, when are you guys going to release your report on this? It's been several months. When is it going to happen? And I would kind of periodically check in saying, hey, and he wasn't the only one. There were other trad media outfits too that were just deafeningly silent. Now, I want to address something that I've heard at least three, I'm not going to name them, but three trad male figures say to justify their silence, all right? They say, well, I'm not an investigative journalist. I don't have the resources. I don't have the skills, et cetera. And so that's why I've stayed out of this. Give me a break. Give me a break. When Jassy Jacobs, that whistleblower, very courageous, came out in January and made that big, Facebook post exposing this huge cover-up, involving Father Wegner and Father Duverger and all that stuff. Do you know what my resources were? Literally, Facebook. I just reached out to her on Facebook. She's right there on Facebook, public, just sent her a message, said, hey, Jassy, I saw that. Can we please talk? And that's it. That's it. And after that, it was emails and a phone call. And that was it. I mean, everyone has access to that. Yeah. How hard would it have been for any one of these guys to simply email her and say, hey, what's up with this? How hard would it have been for them to take their blogs on which they spill voluminous amounts of ink on all sorts of scandals and abuses in the Vatican II Church? How hard would it have been simply to link to Jassy's post and say, hey, guys, this girl is saying this stuff about, SSPX. People need to look into this, and then just post it. How hard would that have been? They didn't do anything like that. It was complete and total silence. I do not buy this excuse that they're saying, oh, I'm not an investigative journalist, I don't have the reason. Please, sorry, that's totally dishonest. That's totally dishonest. It's being used to justify a cowardly silence, because they know if they were to link to that sort of thing or show any kind of questioning towards the SSPX, they would face the same vicious backlash that we have at Church Militant.
So, from a cultural perspective, it's a very, very loud minority that one confronts, particularly on Twitter, where which is prone to loud minorities.
Yes.
Not demographical minorities, but you feel like how many SSPX are there in the world? Like 2 billion? You go on Catholic Twitter and it feels like that's how many there are. It's 2/7 of the world's population, which is clearly not true. They're a very loud minority. The question is, who controls this loud minority? There's a great scene in the Gangs of New York where Bill Cutting asks out, whose man are you? It's like, who's running this thing? Because if these three male figures, I'll bet I could guess them. I'm probably closely associated with one or more of them, or used to be more so. who's really calling the shots there? Whose man really are they? Because I it's something that pops up when you cross certain groups on Twitter or some of the, not so much Facebook, on YouTube or Twitter. You're like, wow, they make themselves very big and very loud given their relative smallness.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I don't pay too much attention to all the backlash from the SSPXers on Twitter. It is Twitter specifically. It's not really Facebook. It's Twitter. And I remind myself, there was actually a study shown with regard to leftists on Twitter in general, not SSPX, but leftists. And the survey or the analysis actually showed that the people making 92% of the noise on Twitter come from 10% of the population on Twitter. And the vast majority of those are leftists, which is why you see such a barrage of Trump hatred and all that stuff on Twitter. You see a lot of that. And It's also this really unhealthy echo chamber for leftist media because they feel like, oh, we're getting so much affirmation because look at all this Twitter support we're getting. Well, I applied the same sort of thing to the SSPX. I think the analysis is probably similar, that the people in the Twitter universe from SSPX who are making the loudest amount of noise are probably from a very small fraction of the actual SSPX community. In fact, a lot of people have told me that SSPX has actually discouraged people from going on social media because they're very kind of against the whole internet and that kind of thing. So a lot of SSPXers aren't really even on social media. So there is a tiny little fringe, and they happen to be just the nastiest people on earth. I've actually ended up having to block people, not because I'm not interested in listening to legitimate criticisms. I've never had a problem with legitimate criticisms, but when it comes to name calling, insults, impugning my integrity, calling me a liar or anything like that, it's like, okay, you've crossed the line. You don't deserve to be heard anymore. Block. Right.
Yeah. You're like me. I mean, I think I've blocked probably 20 people in 2 very busy years on Twitter. I haven't been on Twitter that long, but I got a high threshold. It takes a lot for me to block. And some of the people that you were actually responding to back in April and May without blocking, that proves you have a high threshold too. One thing I would point out that is a bit of a zoomed out perspective with regard to the society is, I mean, they've been very effective at creating, like you were just saying, a much bigger ripple in the pond than is actually representative. And I'm wondering, I don't think any of us knows where exactly it's coming from. I mean, think about it this way. If we take these kind of pairings, myself, my former partner, my former co-host, Taylor Marshall, because of SSPX, and I didn't even weigh in, it really comes from the fact that my brother did on the canonical issue, won't talk to me. A former partner, Trent Horn was saying this the other day, if Taylor Marshall ain't going to talk to his former partner, who's he ever going to debate or talk to when it's not a super friendly interview? It's a good point. And so that's Trent, and we've crossed swords over stuff. But my friend Chris Plants was supposed to have a debate with Matt Gaspers of Catholic Family News. That was literally just on something intellectual, the council. But he backed out at the last minute. We think we don't know. Let me put all of the opinion language in here. We believe, without confirmation, that it's because some shot caller called it off, above him. We don't know, but we think. Mr. Lifesite News won't talk to you. What's his name? John Henry. John Henry Westen won't talk to Christine Niles. All these different pairings of people from the far right wing, like church, talking to a friend or an ex-business associate will be denied dialogue. And it seems to be some sort of, I don't know, authority relationship where it's being called off. I can't confirm it, though. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I don't know with regard to Lifesite News. I mean, I do think that John Henry, I think, is exercising his own independent judgment on this, but he has such a loyalty, years-long loyalty to the SSPX, and maybe there's finances involved as well. I wouldn't be surprised. This is not, attempting to accuse anybody. It's just very well known that SSPX has associations with very wealthy donors, extremely wealthy donors. They're connected to a lot of big money, and that's kind of how they're able to stay afloat and continue to grow. I wouldn't be surprised if John Henry Westen and Lifesite News were also connected to the same kind of donors, because Lifesite and SSPX have been kind of hand in hand for many years, even though Westen himself may not attend an SSPX mass. But you've got a lot of, there's a great deal of pro-SSPX sympathy, at Lifesite for years and years. And I think it's that loyalty that keeps him from wanting to dig as deeply as he should. And I think that's the case with many traditionalist media outfits. I think there's this long time loyalty of defending the SSPX as, they're the real victims here. They've been treated so unfairly by the larger church. And these people have gone to bat for the SSPX for so long. And some of them, quite frankly, not John Henry so much, but others have a major animus towards Church Militant for years and years, major anti-CM bias that coupled with their loyalty to SPX makes them unwilling to listen to the other side.
Right.
So,
yeah, not that there's anything wrong with major donors, but there is a fine line, and you weren't saying so, I know, but there's a fine line in the sand that's really, really difficult to navigate when you do what you guys do or what Lifesite does, or even at a smaller level, what I'm doing, between there's a natural influence, there's a natural confluence and influence between a donor and a donee when the donor likes the work of the donee and is giving you either an attaboy or just wants to help out. But it's difficult not to let the arrow of influence get changed too much. You want to keep your output whatever it already was before you got the donor. And so there is just a big yellow flag that goes up anytime the SSPX issue comes up, because people probably can use their intelligence to figure out that I'm a lot more sympathetic to most of their positions than to McCarrick or the Church Left, whom I harbor virtually no sympathy for. And yet if I say one little thing on Twitter, the entire, that's literally why my ex-partner won't talk to me. He says, I didn't even say something, my brother did. So it's an extremely delicate issue that is these are all the indicia of cover-up. And another tactic they borrow strongly from the left is racing to victimhood status, right? Just racing there. They have the ninja grip on victimhood status, which is why your reportage from the Spotlight investigation is so devastating, because all of a sudden they go from being seen as victim, the superior general, Lefebvre's number one guy, Fillet, well, not a victim, but covering up for victimizers. So that's really troubling. I mean, it's really troubling to see where it's like, man, if I'm feeling a little bias in myself, and I always try to be aletheia oriented, truth oriented, the bias is, oh man, I'm probably going to maybe on TNT, maybe with some of the people that were big fans of us, trads, maybe I was going a little light on some of the SSPX issues that were starting to pop up at the end of my year there. So maybe I need to be, if I'm truly honest about what bias is, I'm guarding against being too soft on that side, not the leftist side. And I think the same goes for you.
Well, here's the thing. What I have noticed, because I've spoken to many people inside and outside of the SSPX, so I've come to learn a great deal about what the SSPX is like, even though I didn't grow up in that community. But I've spoken to many, many people who have grown up in the SSPX communities around the world. I noticed that a lot of people rushing to the SSPX's defense are generally from outside the community. They're like, I always see these caveats, like, well, I'm not SSPX, I don't go to their masses, but, and then they jump in. Well, here's the thing. These people don't really understand what the SSPX is really about. You got to speak to the people who actually grew up in those communities.
Yes.
So this, and it's very eye-opening, because this is what I've heard from multiple people from around the world who don't know each other. What people are taught in SSPX schools and things like that, and they don't like to make this public, but it is on their website if you look for it. They essentially teach that outside the SSPX, there's no salvation.
Right.
They do. They really teach that. And so you're taught from a young age, as a child, in their schools, you can never leave the SSPX. Oh, look at that bad Novus Ordo church out there. If you go to that's a mortal sin if you go to those masses. They even discourage you from going to other traditional Latin masses who are not SSPX. Like they don't like FSSP, they don't like ICK, they don't like any of these. They're like, no, we are the only Latin mass that counts. You cannot go to these others. Otherwise, you are in danger of losing your salvation, committing mortal sin. So, and that's where the word, again, it's not my word. It's words that the word that victims and others have said. Cult. The word cult comes up repeatedly from multiple people I've spoken to around the world about this. Again, and it struck me because I was like, wow, he just said the word cult. And then I'm talking to someone else. She just used the word cult. And then this priest just used the word cult. It's like people from all over the world saying the same thing because it's this cultish mentality of we're the only ones. And here's another point. You are expected to give blind, unquestioning loyalty and obedience to the clergy, period. I mean, because the clergy, SSPX clergy, are considered just this special breed of sacred, holy men that above and beyond any priest in the whole world. They're like special. They're chosen by God. They're like prophets. And so everyone takes a very, obedient attitude towards these priests, and they all want to play favorites with the priest. And which is, why the abuse, that's like a perfect environment to foster abuse because nobody ever questions the priest. The victims can't question the priest because they're immediately shamed because they will never believe this sort of thing from an SSPX priest, holy man. Which is why I think it was so devastating for so many people when I exposed Bishop Fillet, because here he was, Bishop, he was there with Lefebvre, his number one man, so holy. And then for me to reveal him as a cover-up artist as bad as any Novus Ordo bishop, they don't want to accept it psychologically. They just can't accept it. So they will attack me instead of their holy saint Bishop Fillet.
Yeah, as you point out, the clericalism, which is a term we all laughed at in late 2018 because it doesn't exist. We were just joking. It's a byword for homo stuff. He clericalized someone. It's real, and it is like
in the SSPX. Yes,
it is in the SSPX. It's very real, and it seems to be just the perfect condition for the possibility of molestation and cover. It's like a petri dish for growing molestation and cover up. It is there. And okay, last question, because I know you got to go, but what is that odd phenomenon? I'm going to partly answer my own question. The phenomenon you described where, especially on Twitter, it's not people, it's all people that are going to bat. I know people on Twitter that tweet all day long, trads, all day long about Lefebvre, the society, and they're like, every other tweet is undergirded by, bear in mind, I don't go. But they're like the ultimate cheerleading squad. It is cultish. It's odd. This is what most of the Twitter people that get mad at me are. Look, I don't even go. I go to FSSP. I feel a little bit like Frankenstein that helped to create this monster because it was all happening. A lot of them are people that say, they watch TNT and we cultivated. No, I mean, there have been longtime SSPX attendees. Like you say, most of them aren't on Twitter. With the younger crowd, they're like, well, I go to FSSP. Do they not know that whatever tortured relationship there exists between the SSPX and the mainstream church, which they call the Novus Ordo Church, which is odd because they're the ones alleging that they're unified to it, there's the same tortured relationship between FSSP and SSPX. In fact, after Easter, when my brother stirred up the hornet's nest by talking about the canonical status vis-a-vis Marshall, and then your guys' reportage came out like a week later on Spotlight. People all thought they thought there was some collusion, and then Dave winds up working at CM. That was pure providence.
It was. Okay?
But after the important thing is, after that, people were they were upset just that I'd mentioned this, and they were upset that they were saying this stuff like, I don't go to SSPX. I go to FSSP. I was being contacted by FSSP priests that are like, look, they call us names. Yeah. They hate us. They call us bootlickers. Yep. That's the term I see on Twitter the most for them. FSSP people need to know, whether irrespective of the canonical status, that's a dislike situation. That's a breakoff.
Oh, no. Mm-mm. SSPX hates FSSP. They think FSSP were total sellouts. I mean, recall, for those who don't know the history, the FSSP exists because of what Lefebvre did with consecrating those four bishops. Some of the SSPX clergy was so scandalized. They were like, okay, he's crossed the line now, and we cannot be on board with this anymore. So they went to Rome and they asked, can we please have, a special whatever association formed just for us so that we can be in full communion with the church? And that's how the FSSP was created. So this is why SSPX clergy hate them so much. I too have heard back from several FSSP clergy, saying the same sorts of things as you. And there's one, I can't say where, but there's an FSSP parish that's kind of close to an SSPX parish that was involved in many, many scandals, many sex abuse scandals. And so the FSSP actually ended up being something of a haven for some of these former SSPXers to go to.
Right.
And this one priest I spoke to said, he's like, I've got to tell you, a lot of these people suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder. He's like, they're harder to deal with than some of the secular converts that we have. It's like the sort of, I guess, environment that these people grew up in the SSPX is so psychologically unhealthy that they sort of need to be almost deprogrammed in a sense.
Right.
And so anyway.
No, I think I know where. I think I've spoken to the same priest. I also won't say, but I mean, we've spoken to kind of the larger issue here. A lot of people are really mad at Church Militant. A lot of people are really mad at my brother and me. And this is probably the most I've ever spoken about SSPX. They get mad just for association with anyone, Michael Voris, a Gordon, Christine Niles, who says, like, yeah, I'm much more sympathetic to them than McCarrick, but if I'm objective, the way you did an excellent, fair spotlight report, sympathetic to perverts, which weren't even your words, you're quoting somebody else, which is not an uncommon way to title an investigative report, very common way. They just hate you, and it's blind hatred, and it's low information hatred, and it's not necessarily coming from the society themselves. It's coming from this weird echo chamber group of cheerleaders on social media, particularly Twitter, that themselves say, well, I don't go to SSPX, but I hate you guys for taking them on. It's really odd, and all I can do is say, my group of go-to reportage has shrunk. Where I'm like, well, I respect this because I've got a good eye for objectivity. I'm not an investigative reporter myself, but it's shrunk, and I always salute your reporting, and it's always fair. And I know that you were going through exactly what I was in April, where you were like, yeah, I'm much more sympathetic to these guys than the other side, and yet I still have to do my job. So I salute you for that, Christine. You do excellent work. And the last word
I want to say on this is, well, first of all, thank you very much. I appreciate it. That's always encouraging to hear. But people need to understand we are undeterred in our investigations, and all of our critics, especially our most vicious ones, you all need to understand that it's actually your vicious backlash that has made me more determined than ever to expose the extent of the cover-up in the SSPX. So I want to thank you in a special way, because you have actually given me more determination than ever before to continue to investigate this and continue to expose this, because there is much, much more. I guarantee you there will be more coming out, more rolling out. That's it.
Perfectly said. I'm not gonna say anything to queer the deal on that. That's a great last word, Christine. Thanks for coming. People, please like, subscribe, and hit the bell. Our views have been in the tank since the election, and I think they admitted that the algorithm's been tweaked. So there's Volt, people. Thank you so much, Christine Niles. I'll put your information and links up on the show. Yeah, God bless you, and we'll talk to you real soon.
Okay,
Peace.
God bless.
Bye.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst